Good afternoon. My name is Dr. Adam Thorns, and I am the superintendent of Chicago Ridge School District 127.5. I wanted to take this time to give you an update on where we are in our planning process for the reopening of schools in the fall. On Tuesday night, July 14th, I gave a presentation at the board meeting, and I wanted to give a synopsis of that presentation today so that everyone knew where we are in the process. Before we look specifically at Chicago Ridge School District, I wanted to talk about where we are in the governor's plan for Illinois. And we are in phase 4, the revitalization phase. And in this, it does allow schools to reopen under guidance from the Illinois Department of Public Health. And that's where we are currently, and you'll see that face coverings and social distance are the norm. So when we look at what our goals for getting back to school are, our first one is to prioritize the health and safety of our students, our staff, and our community. We also want to support a smooth transition of going back to school, providing a choice of high-quality, rigorous learning options. Another important thing to remember is that we need to prepare for multiple scenarios. As many of us know, day to day, week to week, things are changing not only in our state, in our community, but across the country. And we need to be prepared for us to switch what our plans are at a moment's notice. So we've been taking that into consideration. And to do that, we need to remain nimble and flexible based on what the current guidelines from the Illinois State Board of Education, the Illinois Department of Public Health, and the Center for Disease Control and Prevention guidelines are. When we look at what the Illinois State Board of Education guidance says, it says that in-person instruction is strongly encouraged in phase 4. They also lay out the districts must prepare for an alternative structure to in-person for students with elevated health risks. Districts must plan for return to remote instruction pending any resurgence or second wave of the virus. So when we talk about remaining flexible and nimble, that's what we're talking about. We have to be prepared to go to remote learning on a moment's notice. And phase 4, the Illinois Department of Public Health guidelines. Those include the requiring of appropriate personal protective equipment, also known as PPE. That includes face coverings. Prohibiting more than 50 individuals from gathering in one space. Requiring that symptom screenings occur along with temperature checks, or require that individuals self-certify that they are free of symptoms before entering any school buildings. And finally, requiring an increase in school-wide cleaning and disinfection. The models that District 127.5 are working on right now is a hybrid model. And in the hybrid model, students would split time between being in person and doing remote learning at home. And we would have students be divided into two different groups, an A and a B group. A group would attend in person in their school on Mondays and Wednesdays. The B group would attend in person on Tuesdays and Thursdays. On Fridays, we would rotate, where one week the A group would come in, and the next week the B group would come in. And these are all things that would have to be clearly communicated to our families, where you would have a calendar that would say exactly when your students are coming to school. It's important to remember that when we split these groups up, that we will make sure that all siblings attend on the same day together, so that we do not have families with some students attending one day and other students in their household attending on another day. Remote learning will be taking place on days when students are learning from home. So if you're in the A group, you come on Monday and Wednesday, and then on Tuesday and Thursday you would be remote learning, and then every other Friday you'd either be doing remote learning or in person at the school. The other option that we are offering all of our families is the ability to opt in to full-time remote learning 5 days a week. And this would be synchronous and asynchronous, meaning live and recorded virtual participation in instruction from home. One of the things that we continue to work on in this plan is the understanding that the remote learning in the spring just didn't really cut it. And we all understand that. That was not just in our school district, but that was in school districts across the state. If you remember, we were told we were shutting down on a Friday, shutting down school for a time that was to be determined, and we had to jump right into the remote learning. We are taking our time and planning this out and making sure that we are providing a much more rigorous, much more in-depth instruction for our students who are either going to be choosing to opt into remote learning or to be working on remote learning in the hybrid model. So I want to go through some of the things that we talked about, and we had created the task force, which I talked in my previous video message, which was over 40 different people coming together. We had everything from teachers to administrators to custodians to board members and paraprofessionals, really to give not only their opinion, but to represent other people in their group. And we met multiple times. We talked about a myriad of options and questions, and we were not able to settle on what was the best model. But what we were able to do is have these conversations and take these notes and look at everything to determine what it is that we can do in our buildings. And that is the main reason that we have had to turn to the hybrid model based on the guidelines from the state, is that we just do not have the capacity to follow those guidelines if all of our students come back. And that is why we're going to be running at a 50% capacity. And even though the task force was not able to come up where everyone agreed on one option, we were able to look as an administrative team and really take the notes and the conversation and determine what we thought would balance out the instructional time, trying to get kids in as much as possible with the safety of our students. And that is something we have tried to do throughout this entire process. So what would a classroom look like? Our classrooms will be spaced out with seats as far away as possible. Desks will be utilized when available, and they will face in the same direction when possible. And classrooms that are not able to utilize desks would provide tables, but we do believe that almost every single one of our classrooms would have desks in the hybrid model. And if we had to go to tables, we would tape them off to ensure that students knew how far away they had to be from each other. Social distancing will be observed to the greatest extent possible. We believe that in almost all of our classrooms in the hybrid model, we'll be able to get the seats as close to 6 feet apart as possible. Movement of students will be kept to a minimum. Usually in our junior high classrooms, students will go from classroom to classroom. In our hybrid model, the teachers will be traveling to the classrooms while the students are there. And same thing with specials when we talk about art and music, that they will be coming to the classrooms to work with the kids. For PE, we are going to try to get the students outside as often as possible. If it's a nice day, they are getting outside. We also understand the importance of letting our students have breaks when they are wearing these masks, and those breaks will be built into the schedule. If they're able to get outside and practice that social distancing, we will be taking those breaks. And finally, students will be washing their hands at a minimum of the beginning of the day, after breakfast, before and after lunch, and when returning from outdoors and at the end of the day. Here are some of the health and safety protocols that we have been putting into place. Face coverings will be mandatory. PPE kits, including masks and disinfectant, will be provided for all of our staff members. And temperatures and symptom screenings of all visitors will be conducted upon arrival at all facilities. That includes here at the district office. Isolated waiting rooms are being identified at each facility for individuals demonstrating COVID-19 symptoms. Limits will be placed on non-essential visitors, volunteers, and activities involving external groups. I stated at the board meeting that one of my favorite things is to watch our community, watch our family come in and work with our students. In this time, unfortunately, we will not be able to do that. We will have to limit our visitors to really our staff and our students. Social distance will be observed as much as possible in all areas, in classrooms and hallways and bathrooms. No gatherings of 50 individuals, anything over 50 individuals is not allowed in any one space. And buses will be limited to a maximum of 50 people. Completion of COVID-19 self-screener by all staff, students, and visitors will be required prior to arriving at school or district offices, and or daily temperature checks. And this is something we are still working through, that if we are going to provide a self-certification for families to complete, or if we will be taking the temperatures of every student coming in, or if we will be doing a combination of both. And temperature checks may be taken throughout the day. So just because we take a temperature when a student first walks in, that does not mean it's the only time that we'd be taking it. This is what the self-certification form, an example, may look like that parents would be requested to fill out. And it really just goes through the symptoms. If your child has a temperature over 104, does your child have chills, muscle pain, and or headache, and checking off yes or no. And if any of these become no, the student should be staying home. Continue with the health and safety protocols for preparing for when a student or staff member may become sick. Any individual who tests positive for COVID-19 or who shows any signs or symptoms of illnesses should stay home. And in the past, we've offered perfect attendance awards. We've encouraged kids to come to school. Those are not allowed this year. The state has said you may not give out any perfect attendance award. This is not the year, if you're feeling under the weather, to try to push through. If you're feeling sick, you need to stay home. Families and staff will be asked to report possible cases to the school where the individual attends or works to initiate contact tracing so that we're aware of where that student has been. The nurse office will collect symptom reports when absences are reported. Usually when you call in and you say that your son or daughter is sick and the office takes that down, now there's going to be specific questions that we will need to have answered so that we can ensure that we are providing the best information. 72 hours must elapse from the resolution of fever without fever-reducing medication, and 10 days must pass after symptoms first appeared prior to return if they have not been tested for COVID-19. And I want to make sure that everyone understands that these are the guidelines that we have been given by the Illinois Department of Public Health and the CDC that we are required to follow. And if a staff member or student is found to test positive, we will continue to follow IDPH guidance regarding quarantine requirements and the potential closure of school. We might be told at any time by the Illinois Department of Public Health that we have to close either an area of the school or the entire school, and we would obviously communicate that with our families. ISB and IDPH have mandated that any individual who has come into close contact with someone testing positive for COVID-19 must self-quarantine for 14 days. So there are times that we might have to shut down an entire classroom. There might be times that we have to self-quarantine people who have been on the bus and who have been into that close contact. ISB and IDPH have defined that close contact as any individual who has been closer than 6 feet for more than 15 minutes. If a classroom or multiple classrooms are required to self-quarantine due to a positive test, those classrooms will transition into remote learning during the quarantine period. If students riding the same bus route are required to self-quarantine, riders impacted will transition into remote learning during the quarantine period as well. And finally, if an individual student is required to self-quarantine, they will transition into remote learning. For our special education department, the special education department will collaborate with parents and students that have medical plans where changes may be needed, and we will address those steps to minimize the chances of infection to their children. And we understand that in instructional special education classrooms, the importance of the use of appropriate PPE for continuous wear, regular hand washing, and disinfecting will be emphasized like in all classrooms, and social distancing will be practiced as much as possible for staff caring for medically fragile students. We touched a little bit on transportation, but buses will maintain their typical route, a maximum of 50 people. That includes the bus driver and any support staff that we may have ride the bus will be maintained for each route. Assigned seating will be implemented to observe social distancing. This will also help us if a student does become sick. We'll be able to understand where they were sitting and who may have been around them. And all passengers and drivers will be required to wear face masks at all times. School-wide cleaning and disinfection. We're going to follow CDC and OSHA guidelines, which lays out extensive deep cleaning of all facilities that has been completed and continues to be completed this summer. Increased daily cleaning protocols will be instituted at all facilities with an emphasis on repeated cleaning of high-touch, high-traffic areas. So areas like doorknobs, sinks, light switches, those are all high-touch areas that we will need to continuously clean throughout the day. We have done bulk purchases of sanitizer, disinfectant, and PPE throughout the summer. Any areas of the school or district facility used by a sick person will be closed off until proper cleaning and disinfection procedures have been completed. Social distancing signage and markings are being added to all facilities. Many of us have seen these when we've had to go to the store, whether they are signs on the floor that remind you to keep the social distancing, or signs up throughout the building that remind you to keep your face mask on, about proper hand washing. Those are all signs that will be going up throughout the buildings. Some preventative procedural changes. Outdoor movement breaks. I touched on this a little bit earlier. But face coverings are not required outside if maintaining 6 feet of social distancing. We understand the importance and the difficulty of wearing these face coverings for a full day are really going to cause, and we want to make sure that we are including those breaks throughout the day. No more than 50 students may congregate in one section of a play area at each time. So playgrounds and out in the fields are going to be sectioned off so that both the students and the staff understand where they're supposed to be keeping that social distancing. And students will be washing their hands after outdoor breaks. At this time, all field trips have been canceled. They will not be permitted. And administrative offices and staff lounges and workspaces will also provide distance seating with physical barriers as needed, along with regular cleaning and disinfection. And to prevent clusters of 50 or more people from gathering, each building will be looking at their arrival and dismissal procedures in order to modify them to ensure we are not having gatherings of 50 or more. And as we talked about earlier, students in the junior high will remain with their cohort throughout the day. No classes will be run with more than 50 individuals in one space at one time, so we would not have more than 50 students for PE or for band. Speaking of band, if we look at some of our specials, our art, our music, our PE, and other fine arts, students will be participating in specials. Face coverings will be required while indoors in all of these classes, including during indoor PE and while singing. And again, that is why we want to get as many of our PE classes outside as we can. Face coverings may be removed if classes move outside and students and staff are able to maintain 6 feet of social distance at all times. Instrumental music lessons do allow for the removal of face coverings if necessary to play an instrument, and we will be working with Mr. Goodman and the band program to determine what is our best course of action under these guidelines. Locker rooms will be closed off to students, and uniforms will not be required to be worn like they've been in the past. And all specials will need to modify their instructional plans to reduce student contact and the sharing of materials. In the past, many, especially in our elementary schools, we know that there are shared bins of crayons and glue and markers. That is not going to be happening this year. Every student is going to have their own group of supplies that will be kept with them, and they will not be sharing supplies or equipment at any time. I wanted to spend just a minute talking about our optional remote learning plan. And this is available for any student with elevated health risk, or a family with health risk, or if a family just does not feel comfortable currently of sending their students in person at school. Everyone is able to opt into this program if they want. This will be full day attendance at home. Instructional work time will be approximately the same amount of time as it would be in person. Consistent implementation of our district's curriculum, and we will coordinate synchronous and asynchronous live and recorded instruction. As I said earlier, this is going to be much different than it was in the spring. The grading and accountability will be very similar to in-person instruction. It will no longer be a pass-fail model. Those who are opting in will receive an A, B, C on that grading scale, and attendance will be taken every single day. We will also provide regular social, emotional learning lessons. Chromebooks will be available for all students, so those are for people opting into the program, as well as students who will be taking part in the hybrid model. Every student will be provided with a Chromebook. Support services will be provided in a teletherapy environment when possible. And as I said at the beginning, our remote plan is still in the process of working through it to ensure that it is much stronger than what we offered in the spring, and more information will be provided on that in the next couple weeks. Now, the selection of the optional remote learning model will be for a minimal commitment until the end of the first trimester, which is approximately 12 weeks. And we have to ask for that commitment to ensure that we have the appropriate staff, not only for the hybrid model, but also for our remote learning. And in the next week or so, we will be sending out the information for our remote learning. And at that time, we will be asking families to take about a week to make those commitments. I said it at the board meeting, I have said it to our staff that although we are requiring a commitment for remote learning for the minimum of a trimester, for those families who start in the hybrid model and for whatever reason do change their minds, we will offer the opportunity to switch from the hybrid model to the remote learning at any time. And if necessary, after that first trimester, enrollment may continue or change into the hybrid model can be made. Some technology updates. Chromebooks will be provided for all students in grades K through 8. Additional considerations will be made for specific needs in other district programs or for students who need those assistive qualifications. And I wanted to really end by talking about, we understand the stress, the anxiety that has come with this COVID-19 pandemic. You see it, I see it when I talk to our staff, I see it when I talk to our families. Everyone has that anxious anxiety of not really knowing what is going on. And I wanted to take this time to thank all of our families and our community for your ongoing partnerships. This is a really, really difficult time for everyone, and the best way to get through it is to do it together and to keep those lines of communication open and to really try to understand why things are happening the way they are. And although we cannot predict the future or what's going to happen, both in the state, in the country, or even in our community, we can continue to do everything in our control to be responsive and flexible. And that is the key, that this is the plan at this date that we are moving forward with, but we have to understand, both the school district and the family and the community, that we are going to all have to be flexible. And that's not something we always are very good at as human beings. I know for myself, I want to know what is happening and so that I can start planning for that. But unfortunately, in this pandemic, we're not always able to do that. And we also ask for your continued patience and adaptability as we work to implement this plan and have to make modifications as necessary. As always, if you have ongoing questions, please do not hesitate to reach out. Here is my email address that I shared out last time. So if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. I hope that everyone stays safe, and as we have more updates, I will make sure that I either prepare more of these videos or send out emails. Thank you and have a wonderful day.